This video is in response to questions about formation editors. A formation editor is simply a function available in many naval war games to allow groups of units or ships to operate as a single cohesive unit. The first formation editor we'll examine is the Naval War Arctic Circle. We have selected a group of ships. When we zoom in, we can see that the ships are operating in some arrangement and formation. We'll zoom back out and take a look at the formation editor. We call it up and we see that there are a number of positions, preset positions. These are named as ASW anti-submarine warfare right, center, follow left, follow right, etc. for each of these positions. The green indicates where the ships are currently assigned, with the Queen Elizabeth in the center. We can assign different units throughout with the group. It's nice to know that the offset is with the position in relation to the central unit. So we can set it according to number of miles or meters ahead or behind to the right or left of the unit. No ships are available to fill the white areas, but they can be moved. It is significant to note that no aircraft can be assigned to this formation editor, only ships. This formation editor is only capable of station keeping. We'll see that we'll change course and see that the ships all turn in relation to the central unit. This is known as station keeping, for they keep almost the exact same distance and bearing from the central unit. The formation editor in NWAC is only capable of station keeping. Other formation editors from other games are capable of conducting sprint and drift patterns or random patterns. A sprint and drift pattern is simply a ship assigned to a large area, a larger zone. When assigned to this sprint and drift, the ship will sprint to the front of the zone, then slow down and drift until it reaches the back of the zone before it sprints again. This is commonly used by anti-submarine warfare ships. When they sprint to the front, their radar is virtually blind. When they drift, their sonar is operating at maximum efficiency. Other patterns are random within a zone, but these are not available for Naval War Arctic Circle. It is significant to note also that each ship is pre-assigned to a certain zone. These ships will not change if a threat appears from another direction. They are non-responsive. This is pure station keeping relative to one another. This is the formation editor for the Harpoon Classic Commanders Edition. This formation editor has, we can see, 4 different zones: the central zone, the anti-air warfare ring, the anti-submarine warfare ring, and the outer screen. Each zone is a patrol. Each section is a patrol zone. We can see the different ships assigned that are available. the range rings indicate 15, 30, 75, and 150 mile range from the center. These can be changed. We'll call up the formation editor. A list of ships in the group appears. There, once clicked, the assigned patrol zone is shown. Ships within the anti-air warfare range ring will conduct station keeping assignment with the central units. Units in the center will also conduct station keeping assignment. Units in the anti-submarine warfare range ring will conduct sprint and drift. The task force is headed in a northerly course. This particular Perry class frigate will sprint to the front of the formation patrol zone and then drift all the way across until it hits the rear of the, as the task force moves, until it hits the rear of the patrol zone before sprinting again to the front. Anti-submarine warfare dedicated ships with towed array sonars are often set in this position. During the sprint, they are virtually blind and their sonar is very ineffective. However, as they drift towards the rear of their patrol zone, the towed array and other hull sonars are very effective. This submarine is out in the outer patrol zone. The zones can be changed size-wise. Also, ships may be assigned more than one zone. They will try to patrol all of them at the same time. This formation editor also allows for aircraft. This will set an anti-air warfare patrol in this zone. We can also set up anti-submarine warfare patrol zones for aircraft, and they may encompass more than one zone. Once aircraft are assigned, the various sensors in each zone can be selected. The main group or in the picket zone can be set. Different emissions control settings for radar, sonar, the limitation of the Harpoon Classic Commanders Edition is there are no relative positions. A formation may be selected as the task group travels on this course, and it may be perfectly functional. However, should the group decide to change course in another direction, the formation patrols will not change. Therefore, if anti-submarine patrol ships are set in this area in the front with previous, with the change in direction, the anti-submarine warfare ships will no longer be able to screen the central units. Therefore, scenarios using the Harpoon Classic Commanders Edition formation editor tend to have more ships assigned in order to cover multiple axes in case of change of direction. Like the Naval War Arctic Circle formation editor, ships within a formation editor will not adjust according to threats detected. This is purely station keeping. Well, not station keeping. The picket and the anti-submarine warfare zones will conduct sprint and drift. However, they will not change in relation to a threat or change of direction for the task group. And this is the formation editor for modern naval ops. We'll select the carrier battle group. When selecting a group in MNO, even though it's in group mode, all the subordinate ships are shown at the same time. This can get quite cluttered when there are air operations in the same zone. We can check the group composition to see that there are 8 ships for this force. With the group selected, we will open the formation editor. The formation editor in MNO is predominantly a station keeping function. We can select different ships. Currently, the carrier is set as the lead ship. All other ships are positioned around her relative position or relative location. We can switch the group lead to another vessel, but for now we'll leave it with the Ranger. If we select one ship, we can see that the Stanley, and zoom in, there is a station shown by a small rectangle or diamond. This indicates where the Stanley is currently assigned, her position. Because she's within her diamond, she is on station. We can change the position of the Stanley and set a new position according to either a relative bearing or a fixed bearing. A relative bearing always takes the position in reference to the lead ship. Therefore, if the lead ship, if the Stanley has been set for approximately north or ahead of the carrier, when the carrier turns to the west, the Stanley will also move to her position to stay relative to the carrier in front. If we select a fixed bearing new station for the Stanley, then if the Stanley is set north of the carrier, the lead ship, then the Stanley will always maintain a northerly position relative to the carrier. Let's set the Stanley to a northerly fixed bearing position. A new station diamond appears. Let's adjust the hole and set her for a relative bearing. We'll assign her relative bearing to be leading the carrier in front of her. The carrier is currently running at a course of 0 degrees. When she changes course 270 approximately, the hull will try to maintain station in front of her. Station positions are groups can be consistent of ships, submarines, and even aircraft. Unfortunately, there seems to be a problem with aircraft. If aircraft are grouped into a formation, it is not possible, doesn't seem to be possible, to assign them because they do not appear in the formation editor. So at this time, it probably only capable of handling ships and or submarines. Each position formation patrol is only for station keeping, as there is no sprint, drift, or other function possible. So no aircraft are assigned according to this formation editor. We'll start this scenario and watch as the Ranger changes direction. Notice the station requirement for the hull moves in relation to where the carrier is headed. So she'll stay always in front of the carrier. This is her new patrol position. The Stanley maintains her position north of the carrier because she was assigned to a fixed station bearing. It is not possible to assign formation air patrols to aircraft. Although aircraft may get grouped in with ships, they will not appear on the formation patrol editor. There is a different way to assign them. Although not technically part of the formation, it is possible to assign patrols around the group through the use of reference points. We'll show you how. We'll assign a number of anti-submarine warfare patrols to screen ahead of the carrier. The carrier's path of motion is westwardly, approximately course 266. We've left the weapons, underwater weapons and other weapons range rings active simply because there are no range rings available within the formation editor. This makes it very difficult from a matter of perspective to know how far out we wish to assign air missions. Firstly, we will define an area. Control right click to drop 4 reference points, approximately there. We can move the reference points around by just clicking on them and dragging. This is quite an improvement from Harpoon 3, where it was more difficult to reposition. With the 4 reference points assigned, we will select and make the reference points relative or rotating. Fixed bearing, is the same as the concept used in the assignment of ships inside the formation. Rotating bearing can also be known as relative. So we want the relative. We will set them for relative bearing because we want this patrol always to be right in the middle of the path where the carrier group is going to travel. So we'll set rotate bearing, and we will select the group. These reference points are now assigned to this group. As we can see with the name, it has a little brackets around an R for relative. With the 4 reference points selected, we will create an anti-submarine warfare patrol mission. We name it, select a patrol to which we will assign three Hawkeyes. We can control the rules of engagement and emissions control for this, but we'll leave it as default. The 1/3 rule means that 1/3 of the aircraft will be on station at any one time. We can see that the zone is marked out by a slightly different color. We'll deselect them so that we don't accidentally use the same reference points for the next mission. We'll create a second anti-submarine warfare mission, a second screen. We'll do the same as before. This will be a rotating reference points in relation to the carrier group. We'll name the mission as Anti-Submarine Warfare Starboard. It's also a patrol mission to which we will assign two Vikings. Last, another ASW mission we will assign to the port side. Same use of the relative reference points. For a change, we can assign two more Vikings. To cover the rear, if the path of intended motion is 266, we will create another anti-submarine warfare mission to cover the rear. To this mission, we will assign two Sea King helicopters. Under the rules of engagement, we will change the emissions control so that the sonar will be active, hopefully. Those are our anti-submarine patrols. These are set for relative position. Now, we believe the enemy is to the north. Just assume that. We'll create another mission for airborne early warning. This time we will set the reference points for fixed bearing, so they will always be to the north of us. We'll name it Airborne Early Warning, and we will assign our 4 Hawkeyes to the mission. We'll assign electronic warfare to protect the group from radar. We'll create, this one is also fixed bearing. Oh, we didn't, well, there was an error. There's an error on this one. We forgot to click. After clicking fixed bearing, we should have clicked on the group. There we go. So it says F within it. That makes it a fixed bearing reference point. There we are. The mission editor, create. This one is now ECM. We will assign our 4 prowlers to the mission. Under the missions doctrine and emissions control, we will turn on the active jammers. Deselect the reference points. With the enemy threat expected from the north, we will create a pair of combat air patrols. We'll set them for fixed bearing to the carrier. And select anti-air warfare patrol, to which we will assign 6 Tomcats. A second combat air patrol is selected, with 6 more Tomcats assigned to her. With all the missions assigned, we'll start the scenario and run it. All the patrols have been launched, and notice all the clutter from the radar, range ring, search arcs. So we'll turn off some of these extra arcs, as well as some of the weapons, so that we can see where our patrols are. Our jammer's up, our fighter patrols are up, our anti-submarine warfare patrols are up, the helicopters are up, and our airborne early warning. Should the carrier decide to go in the opposite direction, we can see the reference points moving to the other side. The fixed reference points do not change and maintain their position relative vis-a-vis to the carrier. It is significant to note that the amount of clutter is quite high, and with all the reference points and aircraft buzzing around, it makes it very difficult to keep track of traffic with the close vicinity of the carrier. These patrols are not technically part of the formation. They're not part of the group. But they do operate with relation to the group so that they can protect it. This is good. The advantage of this is these formations can have aircraft assigned from a land base. So we don't need to have aircraft only from the carrier. We could have fighters occupy this patrol zone or other patrol zones coming from a land base. The fixed bearing air patrols are also good. Unfortunately, they do not react to new threats. Once they're set, if a patrol is set north of the carrier group, it's going to stay exact same position, even if another threat is detected in another area. They do not track, they are non-responsive, but a player needs to know exactly which direction the threat's coming from, and we don't always know that. With an enemy base, we can surmise that there might be aircraft coming towards us, but without some foreknowledge, it's difficult to set relative positions or fixed positions. The most significant is the amount of clutter. We simply can't, whenever we select the carrier, we see all the relative positions plus all the aircraft and the reference points. It's just a nightmare. Not to mention the sonobuoys that clutter the immediate vicinity. Another disadvantage of this is once there are 6 aircraft assigned to each combat air patrol. But if one combat air patrol is shot down, no other aircraft except for the 6 that are already assigned to it can replace it. The AI is unable to send more reinforcement or know to send more reinforcements. The same with all the patrols. The number of aircraft is known, must be known. The AI has no ability to react to losses, or should this aircraft be sent off to pursue a contact or investigate a contact, once their 2 assigned aircraft are launched, then no other aircraft except for those assigned to that particular mission can replace it. So it's limited and not as responsive. This is the formation editor for Harpoon 3. More correctly, this is version 3.9.4. This is a carrier battle group. We'll go to unit mode to see all the ship's positions. We'll activate the formation editor. We can change the size of it for a little bit more for ease of reference. The formation editor also has preferences. We'll turn on a few of them for anti-submarine, anti-air warfare ranges. In addition, the formation editor has sprint and cruise stations, combat air patrol stations, random stations, helicopter sonar stations, airborne early warning stations, sonobuoy stations, and anti-ship stations. We'll activate all of them. If there's too much clutter, we can always turn off some of them. I think there is, so we'll deactivate the anti-surface, anti-submarine warfare. Still too much. Turn off the few weapons ranges. the formation editor automatically has range rings used for reference. This is very handy. We'll select one of the main unit. Oh, sorry, we forgot. We can select the carrier group and see the various ships assigned to her. Within the formation editor, we see each ship has a patrol area. There is an anti-submarine warfare. This is known as the threat axis. The green is for the path of intended motion. As a group travels, the most dangerous point for submarine warfare or incoming submarines, enemy submarines, is along the path of intended motion. So the anti-submarine warfare threat axis is wherever the group is heading, because this is the greatest threat from submarines. The anti-surface warfare threat axis and anti-air warfare threat axes allow the user to set patrols according to different threats. If he believes that the air attack is most dangerous from this direction, he can set anti-air warfare destroyers or other patrols in this, so that they can be always positioned between the high value unit at the mission, the carrier, and the threat inbound threat. If the player believes that this is where an anti-surface warfare threat is possible, we can move it. There may be a battleship or some kind of missile carrying craft over here, and he wishes to assign his anti-surface forces in this direction in response to any threat that is perceived from this direction. The ships in the task force have already been assigned patrol zones. We check the carrier and we can see that she's already been given a patrol zone as it's highlighted when clicked on the carrier. We click on the replenishment vessel bridge and see that she also has a patrol zone near the carrier. As we cycle with the space bar, we cycle through and see that the guided missile destroyer Farragut has her patrol zone. The destroyer Hailer has hers along the threat axis, because she's a Spruance class destroyer and very good for anti-submarine warfare. The Aegis cruiser Anzio has her assigned zone, as well as another Burke class destroyer and the Samuel Roberts, which is a Perry or Underwood class frigate, bringing up the rear. We're going to change one of the Anzio is currently on the anti-submarine warfare axis and has been assigned a patrol zone. We're going to change her. We think that there's an air base in this general direction. We'll back out and we can see there it is. Because of that, we want to have the Anzio always position herself between the carrier and the enemy airbase. Firstly, we can make a tracking threat axis. Therefore, by clicking on the anti-air warfare axis and clicking the tracking axis button, are moving over to the map. our mouse pointer is turned into a target reticle. We can click on one of these land facilities. Now the anti-air warfare threat axis will always be pointed towards this airbase. Even as the carrier moves in this direction, eastward, this threat axis will remain and shift and continue to be pointed towards the airbase. Therefore, by assigning we'll switch it up here, and we'll assign the threat axis to the base. We see that the threat axis continues to switch back. By assigning the Aegis cruiser to this threat axis, the Aegis cruiser will always position herself between the carrier and the anti-air threat. No other formation editor has this tracking capability. The anti-surface warfare range threat axis has also the same capability and can be set to track ships so that any units assigned to it will automatically position themselves in between the threat and the units it wishes to protect. Notice we reassigned the ANZIO simply by clicking on the patrol zone and drag selecting an area. We can see in between the different range rings. We can assign a station keeping order where she's always maintained near the center of her patrol zone. We can give her a sprint and drift patrol zone. This is often for used by anti-submarine warfare capable ships such as the Burke destroyers and the Spruance. And we can also have a random setting. A random setting will just have her go around her patrol zone as she likes. Because she's not on anti-submarine warfare patrol, we will give her a station keeping patrol zone. We'll turn off the preferences. We'll see which ones are random. Right now, the Arleigh Burke has a random patrol zone, and as does the Farragut. If we turn off the random and show the sprint and cruise zones, we see that the sprint and cruise, the other ships are assigned to these various zones. This is a station keeping patrol zone, as we just set one for the ANZIO, another station keeping patrol zone. We've set I think we'll leave the rest of the ships on their patrol zones. We can adjust the size of the range rings for whatever suits our purpose. We can reuse them. This is quite handy to know how far and how big zones are. Now we'll assign some formation air patrols. We can select any, and we'll hit the formation air patrol zone. We wish to assign 3 anti-submarine warfare patrol zones. We assign them according to the anti-submarine warfare threat axis because we want them in front of our carrier. When we select the type of patrol, we are asked whether it's combat air patrol, airborne early warning, a dipping sonar patrol, a sonobuoy patrol, or a surface combat air patrol. We'll start with the sonobuoy patrol. We can set the emissions control for it either active or passive. For now, we're going to leave this particular patrol passive. We will assign a pair of, we can see which ship the aircraft are available for, and we will assign a pair of Seahawk 60B to this zone. The aircraft will always try to, they will launch, oh actually we'll cancel that, that's wrong. We'll assign one. We don't need, unless we want two of them flying in the same general area, we only need to have one. We don't need to be assigning all the aircraft that we want for this zone, because once this Seahawk returns from when it runs out of sonobuoys or low on fuel, it will return to base. A second Seahawk will try to replace it. If a second Seahawk is not available, the AI will immediately try to find another type of aircraft to replace it. It could be a Viking, it could be the Ocean Hawk, if they have the correct weapons and or sonobuoys to fulfill that sonobuoy mission. So there's a great deal of flexibility in this formation editor. The AI will automatically try to choose, and at sometimes it will even rearm and reload helicopters in order to find one ready to fulfill the anti-submarine warfare patrol zone. So we have our helicopter or sonobuoy zone at this point. We're also going to set another air patrol zone. We'll set it in the rear. We're covering the back and set along the anti-submarine warfare threat axis. We'll set a dipping sonar patrol zone. This one we will turn on, we will tell the helicopter to go active with her dipping sonar. Once, as with the sonobuoy patrol, we don't need to assign all 6 in order to have helicopters out. If we assign 1 to the zone, if it returns or is shot down or heads off to prosecute a subsurface contact, a relief helicopter will automatically launch, and the AI will search for an appropriate counterpart or replacement should there not be any SH-60s. It will look for a second type of helicopter. We'll keep it simple. So we have a sonobuoy patrol zone in front. We'll turn and we have a dipping sonar one bringing up the rear. Now we'll assign an airborne early warning patrol. We see that the enemy is coming from the southeast, so we will set an airborne early warning patrol, and we can cancel that. We'll set it along the airborne anti-air warning warfare threat zone. We'll select the aircraft and drag a little zone for her. It will be airborne early warning, to which we want active units. We will assign our one Hawkeye. We don't need to assign all 3, as they will automatically replace each other. With the airborne early warning patrol, we also want to set up an electronic warfare patrol. We don't have a separate selection for this, so we'll just use the airborne early warning. This one we will activate with electronic countermeasures. We will assign one prowler. With the 2 missions up, now we will assign some combat air patrols. We want them a little bit further out, so we've expanded the formation editor, zoomed out. We will now change the range rings, and just so we have a relative idea how big the zone might be. We'll click the anti-air patrol, the air patrol formation patrol, and this time we will assign a combat air patrol mission with active radar. Because we want 2 Hornets up at the same time, we will assign 2 instead of 1. We could go 1, but for our purposes we'll have 2. We'll set up a second combat air patrol with 2 more Super Hornets. By setting up just the combat air patrol, we don't need to assign all 14 Hornets. As the first 2 are automatically detach themselves to prosecute targets, 2 more will constantly replenish the combat air patrol. This gives great flexibility because should all the Hornets be shot down, the AI will rearm Bomber to try and fill the combat air patrol zones. So if there are 60 aircraft or more on here, the AI will try to cycle through them and use them, rearm them if necessary, to protect. We'll start the scenario and let the aircraft launch. The patrols have launched and are moving to their assigned zones. Notice that the carrier is just a single unit. There's no clutter. Well, the missiles are firing, but there's no clutter. The Hornets have detached from the carrier battle group and are out to prosecute a bogey, their own contact. See, they've immediately more are launched to cover their now open patrol zones automatically. The task force patrols, the jammer, the airborne early warning, we can even reassign them to new positions. The helicopters are out. More Hornets launched and immediately detached in order to pursue targets on their own. We can see the Hornets here. They never even made it out to their patrol zone. They had already been notified of target and decided to intercept a boat. Recap. Strength of the ANW threat axes are quite useful. They will track on targets and keep the ships or units assigned to those threat axes pointing towards the most dangerous threats. By 2, it is not necessary to know exactly where all and assign all the assets immediately like the other scenario editors used. It is quite easy to assign one combat air patrol and it will be constantly refreshed with whatever aircraft the AI can find to protect itself. The AI in ANW will also rearm aircraft that were on bombing missions or strike missions in order to provide fighters for coverage on the combat air patrols. The threat axes allow for more flexibility in assignment so that not all ships have to respond to the same. They can be used as relative bearing, but they can also be used to track actively. So as threats are detected, ships will reposition themselves towards that newly detected threat. The range rings in the formation editor give great flexibility and ease of use. The ability to hide the number of ships in the formation is insurmountable and avoids clutter. If we want to see the individual ships, we can go to Unit Display and show the individual ships when we decide, not required. Most importantly, probably, is the ability for ships to conduct their own sprint and drift or random patrol zones within the formation. They are not stuck to station keeping assignments. The use of sprint and drift is doctrinally correct. We can see the Hornets are now flying towards the relief Hornets are now flying towards their combat air patrols. The original Hornets have already been detached to intercept a threat, and the reliefs are already up to fulfill their combat air patrols. The Hornets arrive on station. This concludes how formation editors work in the various naval warfare games.